November 3, 1945. 6:02 a.m., Camp Florence, Arizona. Dawn light turned the desert sky from purple to pink to gold, illuminating mountains that ringed the camp like distant sentinels. Frida Engel stood outside Barracks 12 with 37 other German women, waiting for the morning ritual that still felt impossible after 6 weeks of repetition. The air was cold. Desert cold that bit through thin cotton robes they'd been issued. But the cold wouldn't last. In 20 minutes, she'd be standing under hot water, steam rising around her, warmth penetrating muscles that had been chronically tense for 3 years. She was 34 years old. Before conscription, she'd been a schoolteacher in Berlin, instructing children in mathematics and geography. The Wehrmacht had drafted her into clerical services in 1942, typing orders, filing reports, maintaining records of troop movements and supply allocations. Nothing glamorous, nothing that involved combat, but essential to military bureaucracy. When American forces captured her unit outside Munich on May 10, 1945, nearly 6 months ago, she'd expected execution or imprisonment in conditions that would make death preferable. Instead, she got transport to America. And this: daily hot showers, clean clothes, abundant food, and living conditions better than anything she'd experienced in the last 3 years of war. The whistle blew at 6:05. Corporal Nancy Williams, Women's Army Corps, 28 from Ohio, opened the bathhouse door and gestured for them to enter. "Morning, ladies. Same as always. 20 minutes. Use all the hot water you want. We're not rationing." The last sentence still made Frida pause. Not rationing. Hot water available without limit, without apology, without punishment for using too much. It contradicted everything she knew about resource scarcity in wartime. Even before capture, even in Wehrmacht facilities that were supposed to be well supplied, hot water had been scarce luxury, rationed carefully, available maybe once weekly if you were lucky. The bathhouse was a large room with 20 shower heads along 2 walls, tiled floor with drains, benches for undressing, and hooks for hanging robes and towels. Steam was already rising from the showers. Someone had turned them on early, heating the room, ensuring the water would be immediately hot, rather than requiring minutes of waiting while cold water ran. Frida hung her robe on a hook, labeled with her prisoner number, placed her towel on the bench, and walked to the nearest shower head. She turned the valve, single handle, red dot for hot, and water thundered out immediately. Hot water. Not lukewarm, not tepid, but genuinely hot. Steam rose, clouding the mirror on the opposite wall, filling the room with warmth and moisture. She stepped under the spray, feeling water pound against her scalp and shoulders. The temperature was perfect, hot enough to sting pleasantly, not hot enough to burn. She tilted her face up, letting water pour over features that had been chronically cold for months during transport and the final chaotic weeks in Germany. The heat penetrated, relaxing muscles she hadn't realized were clenched, warming skin that had forgotten what comfortable temperature felt like. This happened every morning. Every single morning for 6 weeks. Hot showers, unlimited duration within the 20-minute window, with soap freely available, and clean towels provided daily. The luxury was so consistent, it had stopped feeling like luxury, and started feeling like right. Like this was how human beings were supposed to live, with access to hot water and cleanliness and dignity that came from being able to wash whenever needed. If this makes you question everything you thought you knew, you're paying attention. Subscribe now. These stories deserve to be heard. For the entirety of Frida's adult life, scarcity had been background condition of existence. Even before the war, even in 1930s Berlin, resources were carefully managed. Hot water was expensive luxury. Daily bathing was impossible for most families. The war had intensified scarcity until it became a defining characteristic of German civilian life. Rationed food, rationed fuel, rationed everything, including basic hygiene supplies. By 1945, as Allied bombing devastated infrastructure, hot water became memory rather than reality. Frida's last hot bath in Berlin had been January 1945, 10 months ago, heated on a stove after carrying water up 4 flights of stairs because the building's plumbing was damaged. The bath had been lukewarm by the time she'd actually gotten in, shared with her sister to conserve the heated water, and so precious she'd tried to make it last an hour. After conscription, conditions worsened. Wehrmacht facilities had showers, but hot water was scarce, available maybe once weekly on rotation, with hundreds of women competing for limited access. Frida had developed technique of washing from a bucket with cold water, using minimal soap, accepting that actually feeling clean was an impossible goal. By the time of capture in May 1945, she'd gone 3 weeks without proper washing, her uniform stiff with accumulated sweat and dirt, her hair so oily it had formed clumps that resisted combing. The American propaganda, what little she'd heard, had suggested that prisoners would be worked to death in harsh conditions, exploited for labor, treated as subhuman. The propaganda hadn't mentioned hot showers. It hadn't prepared her for the moment, 2 hours after arrival at Camp Florence, when Corporal Williams had led the newly arrived prisoners to the bathhouse and announced, "You'll shower daily. Hot water available every morning, 8:06:05 to 6:25. Additional showers 3 times weekly in the evening if you want them. Soap and towels provided. No restrictions on duration except the time window." Frida had thought she'd misheard. Daily showers, hot water, no restrictions? It seemed impossible, elaborate deception designed to make the eventual deprivation more cruel. But the next morning, the whistle had blown at 6:05, and the showers had been hot, and it had happened again the next day, and the next, until 6 weeks had passed and the hot water kept coming. Now, standing under the spray, Frida picked up the bar of soap from the shelf beside her shower. Ivory soap, American brand, white and smooth and smelling clean without being perfumed. She'd been given a new bar just yesterday when her previous one had worn thin. The camp distributed soap weekly, 1 bar per person, with the expectation that it would be used. Not hoarded, not saved for emergencies. Used, because there would be more soap next week and the week after. She lathered the soap between her hands, watching foam erupt, and washed her body with thoroughness that had become ritual. Face first, then neck and shoulders, working down systematically. Arms, torso, legs, feet. Each area received attention. Soap applied and rinsed until skin felt clean rather than just wet. The soap moved over her body easily, creating slick surface that water rinsed away completely. No residue, no film, just clean skin. Her hair required more attention. It was long, past her shoulders, and thick. She'd kept it braided during Wehrmacht service, easier to manage without frequent washing. Now she wore it loose, washed it daily, and it had transformed from lank and oily to soft and manageable. She worked shampoo through it, another American product, dispensed from large bottles attached to the walls, creating foam that smelled like flowers. The shampoo made her hair slippery and easy to detangle. She rinsed thoroughly, ensuring no residue remained, feeling hair that felt like hair rather than straw. The entire process took 12 minutes. When she finished, she stood under the hot water for another 3 minutes, not washing anymore, just standing in warmth and steam and the simple pleasure of being clean. The water continued falling, unlimited, not rationed, not measured against scarcity, just available because it was needed. At 6:25, the whistle blew. Frida turned off her shower, reluctantly, even after 6 weeks, and moved to the benches. She dried with a clean towel, white and thick and slightly rough in pleasant way. The towel absorbed water efficiently, leaving her skin damp but not dripping. She wrapped it around herself temporarily while she dressed in the clean clothes laid out on the bench. Underwear, cotton dress, socks, all washed and dried overnight by camp laundry staff. Dressed, hair still damp and loose, Frida looked at herself in the mirror above the sinks. The woman reflected was dramatically different from the one who'd arrived in September. Her face had filled out slightly. Adequate food was restoring health. But more significantly, she looked clean. Her skin had lost the gray tinge of accumulated dirt. Her hair was light brown rather than the darker color unwashed hair had appeared. Her eyes were clearer, less shadowed by exhaustion. She looked like a person rather than a refugee. This transformation happened daily through the simple act of hot showers and adequate hygiene. Being clean wasn't just about removing dirt. It was about restoring dignity, about treating body with care rather than neglect, about signaling to oneself and others that one's body mattered and deserved basic maintenance. This wasn't sentiment. This was policy, though Frida wouldn't understand the framework for weeks. The American approach to prisoner management, particularly for female prisoners, emphasized hygiene as a crucial component of security and morale. Adequate bathing facilities prevented disease, reduced depression, improved cooperation, and demonstrated American values of cleanliness and individual dignity. The policy was documented in Camp Florence administrative memos. Female prisoners will have access to hot showers daily, morning hours, with additional evening access 3 times weekly. This serves multiple purposes. First, disease prevention. Proper hygiene reduces spread of communicable conditions, particularly lice and skin infections common in transported populations. Second, psychological stability. Clean prisoners are calmer, less prone to despair, more cooperative with camp administration. Third, demonstrating American standards. Adequate bathing facilities showcase American prosperity and values, contrasting with primitive conditions in Axis facilities. Fourth, practical efficiency. Daily showers reduce medical complications, decrease mortality, and improve overall prisoner health, reducing burden on medical staff. The camp had installed substantial infrastructure to support this policy. Industrial water heaters maintained temperature. Plumbing was designed for high volume. Soap and towels were budgeted as recurring expense rather than luxury. The cost was considered worthwhile investment in prisoner health and morale. Over the following weeks, Frida learned the full structure of hygiene provisions at Camp Florence. The daily morning showers were supplemented by evening showers on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, 18 to 18:30. Laundry service occurred twice weekly. Dirty clothes deposited in bins on Monday and Thursday, returned clean on Tuesday and Friday. Each woman received 3 sets of clothing, allowing rotation while laundry was being processed. Fresh towels were provided daily. Soap was distributed weekly without need to request it. The camp also had a beauty salon, converted storage room where a civilian contractor, Mrs. Dorothy Chen, provided haircuts and styling twice monthly. The service was voluntary but popular. Mrs. Chen was 61, Chinese immigrant who'd operated salon in Phoenix before the war, now contracted by the military to provide services to female prisoners. She was professional, efficient, and treated German prisoners identically to how she'd treated civilian customers. Frida's first haircut at the salon was a transformative experience. Mrs. Chen washed her hair in a proper sink with hot water and real shampoo, then trimmed damaged ends and shaped it into a style that framed her face. The process took 30 minutes. When it was done, Frida looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone who could be mistaken for civilian rather than prisoner. Her hair looked healthy, professionally styled, cared for rather than neglected. "You have good hair," Mrs. Chen said through the camp interpreter. "Thick, strong. Takes shape well. Come back in 6 weeks and I'll trim it again." The assumption that Frida would still be here in 6 weeks, that her hair would need ongoing maintenance, that she existed in time beyond immediate survival, these implications were startling. Mrs. Chen was treating her as person with future, not prisoner awaiting disposal. By December, Frida's life had settled into routine that felt almost normal. Wake at 5:45, morning shower at 6:05, breakfast at 7 now, oatmeal or eggs, toast, coffee. Work assignment, 8:30 to 12 now. Frida worked in the camp library, cataloging books and helping other prisoners locate materials. Lunch at 12:30. Afternoon work 13:30 to 17 man. Dinner at 18 man. Evening shower on designated days, or free time for reading, writing letters, walking the camp perimeter. Lights out at 22 around. The routine was structured but not oppressive. Within the framework, considerable autonomy existed. Choosing what to read, how to spend free time, whether to attend optional activities like English lessons or craft workshops. The structure provided stability, predictability, safety that had been absent during the war's chaotic final months. In January 1946, Mail service began operating regularly. Frida received her first letter from home, from her sister Greta in Berlin. The envelope was thin, travel-worn, addressed in handwriting that looked shakier than Frida remembered. Inside was single sheet of paper, words cramped to fit maximum information in minimal space. Frida, we received notice you're alive and in America. This is complicated relief. Grateful you survived. Devastated you're so far away. Berlin is worse than you can imagine. Our neighborhood is completely destroyed. The building is gone. Just rubble. Mother died in the February bombings. I'm sorry to tell you this way, but you deserve to know. I'm living with Aunt Helga in Potsdam, 3 rooms shared with another family. Water comes from a pump 2 blocks away. We carry it in buckets. Heat is scarce. We burn anything combustible. Food is rationed severely, maybe 100-200 calories daily, often less. The Russian occupation is difficult. I won't write details that will be censored, but conditions are harsh. Women are not safe after dark. Many are leaving for the western zones when possible. I don't know when you'll be released, but I'm not sure you should rush to return. Life here is survival, nothing more. At least in America you have food and shelter and safety. That's more than Berlin can offer. Write when you can. I love you. Greta. Frida read the letter 4 times, each reading deepening the hollow feeling in her chest. Her mother was dead. The home was gone. Her sister was living in dangerous conditions, hungry and cold and unsafe. Everything she'd known had been destroyed while she'd been learning to appreciate hot showers in Arizona. The guilt was immediate and irrational. Guilt that she was safe while her family suffered. Guilt that she had hot water and adequate food while Greta carried water from pumps and burned furniture for heat. Guilt that she'd found strange peace and routine while her mother had died in rubble. That evening, Frida skipped the Tuesday shower. She sat in her bunk area, holding the letter, trying to process information that made her current life seem impossibly distant from the reality awaiting in Germany. Other women noticed her distress. Elizabeth Hoffman, 42, former nurse from Hamburg, sat beside her. Bad news from home? Frida nodded, unable to speak. Most letters are bad news. Elizabeth said quietly. Everything's destroyed. Everyone's hungry. The occupation is difficult, but you can't help them from here by refusing to take care of yourself. The shower is still available. You should go. My mother's dead and my sister is starving, and I'm taking hot showers every morning like I'm on vacation. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment. Your mother would want you to take the hot showers. She'd want you healthy and clean and safe, not suffering in solidarity. The logic was sound but insufficient. Frida remained on her bunk, letter clutched in her hand, unable to bridge the gap between her reality and her family's. Corporal Williams found her 20 minutes later. Heard you got bad news. I'm sorry. Do you need anything? Frida shook her head. Williams sat on the adjacent bunk, uninvited, but not intrusive. Loss is complicated in war. You survived. That's not betrayal of people who didn't. Your being miserable here doesn't make them less hungry there. Take care of yourself. That's not selfishness. That's survival. The words were similar to Elizabeth's, but coming from American Guard, they carried different weight. Williams could have been indifferent to prisoners' grief. Instead, she'd sought Frida out, offered comfort, expressed genuine sympathy. Enemies didn't do that. Captors in death camps didn't notice when prisoners received devastating news. Frida wrote back to Greta 2 days later, carefully wording the response. Dear Greta, I'm devastated about Mother. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you're facing such difficulty. Conditions here are adequate. I have food and shelter and safety, as you say. I don't know when I'll be released. Repatriation schedules are being arranged, but nothing is certain. Take care of yourself. Stay safe. I love you, and I miss you. Frida. She didn't mention the hot showers or the haircuts or the library work, or the way she'd been paid in camp scrip and could purchase candy at the canteen. Those details felt obscene when Greta was carrying water in buckets and burning furniture, but she hoped the subtext was clear. She was surviving with dignity, and maybe that was enough for now. February brought more letters from Germany, each one painting grimmer picture than the last. A former colleague wrote about schools being closed, children malnourished, teachers working for food rather than money because money had no value. Another friend described the black market, trading jewelry for potatoes, selling family heirlooms for fuel. A cousin wrote about the mass migration westward, away from Soviet occupation toward American and British zones. Families walking hundreds of miles with children and elderly, many dying en route. Each letter made Frida's current life seem more surreal. She continued taking hot showers every morning because the alternative, voluntarily making herself dirty and uncomfortable, seemed pointless and wouldn't help anyone. But the guilt persisted. Low-grade discomfort that intensified every time she turned on hot water or received clean towels or ate adequate meals. If you're beginning to see how deeply propaganda shaped every corner of this war, and how fragile those illusions were, subscribe now. The full picture is always more complicated than the myths. In March, the camp administration announced new policy. Major Catherine Reynolds, 46 WAC officer who'd recently taken over camp administration, assembled all prisoners in the mess hall and addressed them through interpreters. Repatriation schedules are being finalized. Beginning in May, prisoners will be returned to Germany in groups, processed through occupation authorities. However, she paused for emphasis. Repatriation is voluntary, not mandatory. If you have legitimate reasons to remain in the United States, you may apply for delayed repatriation, or, in exceptional cases, immigration. Applications will be evaluated individually. Approval is not guaranteed, but the option exists. The announcement created immediate buzz. Voluntary? They could choose to stay? The possibility hadn't occurred to most prisoners. They'd assumed repatriation was automatic, inevitable, the natural conclusion of captivity. The idea that staying was option required complete recalibration. That evening, in Barracks 12, women discussed possibilities. Elizabeth was pragmatic. Why would anyone want to stay? This is America, but it's still imprisonment. We want to go home. Inga Schaefer, 38, disagreed. Home to what? Rubble? Starvation? Occupation by Russians? At least here we have hot water and food and safety. But family is in Germany. We have obligations. Some of us don't have family left. Inga's voice was flat. My parents are dead. My husband didn't return from the Eastern Front. My children were evacuated and I don't know where they are. What am I returning to? The question hung in the air. For prisoners with surviving family, returning was obvious choice despite difficulty. But for prisoners who'd lost everyone, who had no home to return to, who faced rebuilding from absolute zero, staying in America, even in restricted circumstances, might be preferable to returning to devastation. Frida lay in her bunk that night, unable to sleep. She had family. Greta was alive. Aunt Helga was alive. But her mother was dead. Her home was destroyed. And conditions in Berlin were brutal. Returning meant hardship, danger, scarcity of everything, including basic hygiene and hot water. Staying meant continued imprisonment, yes, but imprisonment that included daily hot showers, adequate food, safety, and eventually, if she could navigate immigration bureaucracy, possibly freedom and new life in a country that hadn't been bombed to ruins. The choice should have been obvious. Family required her return, but the hot showers had taught her something about living conditions she couldn't unlearn. She'd remembered what it felt like to be genuinely clean, to have hot water available daily, to care for her body rather than just survive in it. The thought of returning to bucket washing and cold water and fuel scarcity and danger, the thought made her physically ill. She was trapped between obligation and self-preservation, between family duty and personal well-being, between the person who'd been raised to prioritize collective over individual and the person who'd learned that individual dignity mattered. Over the following weeks, women began making their choices. Elizabeth would return. She had children in Hamburg. Reunification was imperative. Inga would apply to stay. She had no one and nothing drawing her back. Others wavered, torn between competing imperatives. Mrs. Chen, the hairstylist, offered unexpected perspective during Frida's April haircut. I came to America 40 years ago, she said, trimming carefully. Left China, left family, came here with husband who'd promised better life. It was hard. Different language, different culture, different everything. But we built new life. had children, opened business. It was worth it. But you chose to leave. You weren't forced out by war. True. But leaving is leaving, whether by choice or circumstance. You're choosing whether to return to destruction or stay where conditions are better. That's legitimate choice, not betrayal. My sister needs me. Does she? Or does she need you to survive and thrive so that someday, when things stabilize, you can help her? Dead martyrs help no one. Surviving people can send money, sponsor immigration, provide support. The logic was compelling but didn't eliminate guilt. Choosing comfort over hardship, choosing self over family. These things contradicted everything Frida had been taught about duty and sacrifice. In early May, Major Reynolds called Frida to her office for private conversation. I understand you're conflicted about repatriation. I've reviewed your file. You have sister in Berlin, no other close family. You worked as teacher before the war, have administrative skills, speak some English, and have performed excellently in camp library. You'd be eligible for delayed repatriation and possible immigration sponsorship if you choose that path. Frida sat in the chair across from Reynolds, trying to process that this was real conversation about real options. How would immigration work? Complicated. You'd need sponsor. American citizen willing to vouch for you. You'd need employment lined up. You'd remain in custody while applications processed. Could take months or years. But it's possible path if you want to stay. And if I return to Germany, transport will begin in June. You'd be processed through occupation authorities, receive small amount of money and transport to your registered address, then released into civilian population. After that, you're on your own. On your own. In destroyed Berlin, with inadequate food and water, without hot showers or safety or the infrastructure that made daily dignity possible, versus staying in custody but with those amenities, with possibility of eventual freedom in a country that hadn't been bombed into medieval conditions. Can I think about it? Of course, but decide by end of May. Transport schedules are being finalized. Frida left the office with mind spinning. She had 3 weeks to decide her future, to choose between family obligation and self-preservation, between guilt and survival. That evening's shower was longer than usual. Frida stood under hot water, letting it pour over her, trying to imagine returning to Berlin where hot water was luxury rather than daily reality, trying to imagine carrying buckets from pumps, washing from basins, accepting that genuine cleanliness was impossible aspiration. The thought was physically repellent after 8 months of daily hot showers. She picked up her bar of soap, ivory, white and smooth, distributed weekly without request, and washed slowly, methodically, paying attention to the ritual that had become central to her day. The soap created foam easily, slid over skin that was healthy and clean, rinsed away completely, leaving no residue. This was how humans should live. Not as luxury, but as standard. The fact that it was luxury in Germany was indictment of Germany's current state, not argument for returning to share that deprivation. By mid-May, approximately 40% of the camp's female prisoners had applied for delayed repatriation or immigration sponsorship. The applications revealed patterns. Younger women without children were more likely to apply. Women whose entire families had died were more likely to apply. Women with professional skills were more likely to apply. Women with families waiting in Germany almost always chose repatriation despite hardship. Frida remained undecided. She wrote to Greta, carefully wording the letter. There may be option to delay my return or possibly stay in America permanently. I don't know if this is right choice. I want to see you, want to help you. But I'm also afraid of conditions there. What do you think I should do? Greta's response arrived in early June. Frida, I love you, and I miss you, and I want you home, but I'm not naive. Life here is brutal. You'd be returning to hardship I wouldn't wish on anyone. If you have option to stay in America, where you have safety and food and future, I think you should take it. I'll survive here. I'm strong. But you surviving there, building new life, sending help when possible, that's more valuable than you suffering alongside me. Stay. Build something. Help me from position of strength rather than shared weakness. I give you permission to choose yourself. Greta. Frida read the letter 5 times, crying through each reading. Her sister, hungry, cold, living under difficult occupation, was telling her to stay in America, was releasing her from obligation, giving permission to prioritize self-preservation over family duty. The gift was enormous and devastating in equal measure. She made her decision the following day. She submitted application for delayed repatriation and immigration sponsorship, citing her teaching credentials and library experience as marketable skills, listing Major Reynolds as reference. The paperwork was extensive, requiring documentation of her background, education, work history, character references. She completed it methodically, aware that she was choosing comfort over hardship, self over family, future over obligation. The guilt was substantial but manageable. Greta had given permission. Her mother, if she'd survived, would have wanted Frida safe and healthy, rather than suffering in solidarity. Choosing to stay wasn't betrayal. It was survival, strategic retreat. Investing in future when present was untenable. On June 15, 1946, the first group of repatriates departed Camp Florence. 60 women boarded trucks that would take them to San Francisco, then to ships crossing the Pacific to Europe, then to processing centers in occupied Germany. Elizabeth was among them. She hugged Frida goodbye, fierce embrace that communicated more than words. Take care of yourself. Build good life here. Send money when you can. Maybe someday conditions will improve and I can visit. All right. I'll send packages. I'll help however I can. I know you will. Don't feel guilty. You're making right choice for you. That matters. The trucks departed, leaving behind approximately 160 women who'd chosen delayed repatriation or applied for immigration. They remained in custody, continued working, continued the routine of daily showers and adequate meals and safety, while bureaucracy processed their applications. Frida's application was approved in September. Mrs. Chen had agreed to sponsor her, offering position as assistant in the salon she planned to reopen in Phoenix after the war fully concluded. The sponsorship wasn't charity. Frida had marketable skills, spoke increasingly good English, and had demonstrated reliability. It was business arrangement that happened to offer escape from devastated Europe. The final paperwork took another 6 months. During that time, Frida remained at Camp Florence, continued working in the library, continued taking hot showers every morning, continued living in strange limbo between prisoner and immigrant. The hot water never stopped flowing. The soap continued arriving weekly. The clean towels appeared daily. The routine persisted, reliable and life-sustaining. Evidence that this level of infrastructure and care was sustainable rather than temporary deception. In March 1947, Frida was released from custody and officially immigrated to the United States. She moved to Phoenix, began working with Mrs. Chen, rented a small apartment with actual plumbing and hot water heater. The transition from prisoner to immigrant was surreal. Suddenly free to move without restriction, to make decisions without permission, to live as civilian rather than captive. The first morning in her apartment, she stood in the bathroom staring at the shower. It was simple fixture. Nothing elaborate. Just standard American bathroom with tub, shower head, and taps that controlled water temperature. She turned on the hot water, waited for it to heat, then stepped under the spray. Hot water poured over her, unlimited and unpunished, available because she wanted it rather than because schedule permitted it. The freedom was overwhelming. She could shower for 5 minutes or 50. She could use as much soap as she wanted. She could wash her hair twice if she felt like it. No one monitored her, timed her, restricted her access. This was her water, her bathroom, her choice. She washed thoroughly, methodically, paying attention to the ritual that had sustained her through captivity and transition. The soap created foam. The water rinsed it away. Her hair became clean and soft. The entire process took 15 minutes. When she finished, she stood under the hot water for 5 additional minutes, not washing anymore, just standing in warmth and steam and freedom. Decades later, in a comfortable Phoenix home, Frida Engel, remarried after her first husband's death from Korean War injuries, mother of 3, grandmother of 8, maintained the same morning routine. Wake at 5:45. Shower at 6 Pauli. Thorough washing. Careful attention to hair. 5 minutes standing under hot water at the end, just experiencing warmth. The routine had persisted for 40 years, unchanged except that now the shower was hers, rather than camp facilities. Her granddaughter, 17 and perpetually rushed in the morning, complained about the bathroom being occupied. "Oma, why do you take such long showers? You're using all the hot water." Frida finished drying her hair, still long at 76, still washed daily, and looked at the girl. "I'm not using all the hot water. The hot water heater is adequate for everyone. I just take time to wash properly. But you're in there for like 20 minutes. That's excessive." Frida hung her towel on the rack, precise motion perfected over decades. "When I was your age, hot water was luxury I could access maybe once a month. During the war, hot baths were impossible. After the war, in the prisoner camp in Arizona, I learned what it meant to have hot water every day. I learned that being clean wasn't luxury. It was dignity. It was treating my body with care it deserved. I've never forgotten that lesson. So yes, I take 20-minute showers. Because I can. Because hot water is available. Because being genuinely clean matters. That was like 50 years ago, Oma. Things are different now. Things are different because I chose to stay where things were different. I chose hot water and safety over family obligation and returning to destruction. That choice wasn't easy. But every morning when I shower, I'm reminded it was right choice. Before you go, subscribe. Because history isn't just what happened. It's what we choose to remember and why. The bathroom mirror fogged from shower steam, obscuring Frida's reflection. She wiped it clear with her hand, looking at herself. Face lined but healthy. Hair still thick though gray now. Eyes clear behind glasses. She looked like someone who'd lived well, who'd had resources to care for herself, who'd made choices that prioritized survival over martyrdom. On the counter sat a bar of soap. Ivory, same brand the camp had distributed, purchased out of habit and loyalty to the product that had accompanied her transformation. The soap was white and smooth and smelled clean. She picked it up, felt its weight and texture, returned it to the soap dish precisely. This soap was just soap, but it represented larger truth about choosing life over death, comfort over suffering, future over obligation to past. The war had taught millions that suffering was virtue, that choosing hardship over comfort was moral imperative, that self-sacrifice was highest form of love. But in a camp in Arizona, a different lesson was taught. Self-preservation isn't selfishness. Comfort isn't betrayal. And choosing to live well rather than suffer alongside others is legitimate and sometimes necessary choice. The measure of a nation isn't found in its weapons or its victories. It's found in its infrastructure, in hot water heaters that work reliably, in plumbing that delivers cleanliness without rationing, in the daily, repeated choice to provide dignity through adequate hygiene facilities. It's found in soap distributed weekly without request, in towels provided daily without complaint, in shower facilities that accommodate everyone without artificial scarcity. And the measure of an individual is found in recognizing when survival requires choosing self over sacrifice, when helping family means building strength elsewhere rather than sharing weakness, when hot water every morning isn't decadence but foundation of dignity that makes all other contributions possible. Frida walked out of the bathroom, leaving it available for her granddaughter who'd complained about waiting. The girl rushed in, turned on the shower, and hot water flowed immediately. Unlimited, reliable, taken for granted because she'd never known scarcity. That ability to take hot water for granted was the goal, the achievement, the reason Frida had chosen to stay in a country where infrastructure worked and dignity was built into daily routines rather than being occasional luxury. The soap remained on the counter, white and smooth and ordinary. Testament to the truth that sometimes civilization is measured in gallons of hot water delivered without restriction, in daily access to cleanliness that restores dignity, in the choice to build life where infrastructure supports flourishing rather than just survival. Sometimes choosing yourself is the only way to eventually help anyone else. Sometimes hot water every morning is the foundation of all other good decisions. Sometimes staying rather than returning is the hardest and rightest choice.